The heavy bulldozer blade hovered just inches from the front porch. Rain lashed against the metal, sounding like bullets. Vance screamed at the operator to crush the house, his veins bulging in his neck. But then the front door creaked open. Oona didn't just step out. She held up the broken hull of a model ship, and when Vance saw what was spilling out of it, his face turned the color of ash. But to understand why a billionaire was terrified of a wooden toy, we have to go back 48 hours. The rain had been falling for a week straight. At the Blackwood Assisted Living Facility, the sound was deafening. Oona sat by the window, watching the mud slide down the glass. To the nurses, she was just room 304. A confused old woman who mumbled about a ship. They didn't know that Oona wasn't confused. She was waiting. For 20 years, she had been a prisoner here. Not behind bars, but behind a wall of medication and lies. Her nephew, Vance, had put her here the week after her husband died. "It's for your own good, Auntie," he had said, signing the papers with a gold pen. That pen, that was his fatal mistake. He thought signing a paper made him the owner. He forgot that ownership isn't about ink. It's about blood. Oona checked her reflection. The woman staring back was gray, thin, and invisible. Perfect. Being invisible was a superpower. She waited for the 3 p.m. shift change. The delivery trucks always left the back gate open for exactly 90 seconds. Thunder shook the building. The lights flickered. Oona moved. She didn't run. Running attracted attention. She shuffled. She wore her gray cardigan and clutched a plastic bag tight to her chest. Inside wasn't clothes. It was a hammer she had stolen from the maintenance cart 6 months ago. She slipped through the laundry room, past the distracted guards complaining about the leak in the roof, and stepped into the storm. The cold hit her like a physical blow. The mud sucked at her slippers, but Oona didn't stop. She walked into the tree line, letting the relentless spring rain wash away the smell of antiseptic and despair. She was 72 years old, she had no money, and she had 5 miles to walk in a storm. But she had a destination. The Highgate Manor stood on a hill overlooking the city, or at least what was left of it. When Oona finally reached the iron gates, her lungs burned. The estate was a skeleton. Vines strangled the stone pillars. The windows were dark eyes staring blindly at the city below. Vance had let it rot. He didn't care about the history. He only cared about the land value. She squeezed through a gap in the fence. The garden was a jungle of wet thorns and new spring buds pushing through the decay. It was poetic, really. Life fighting to survive amidst the rot, just like her. She reached the front door, locked. She walked around to the conservatory. The glass was grime-streaked, but she knew the latch on the 3rd pane was loose. Her husband, Arthur, had meant to fix it 20 years ago. Thank God he hadn't. Oona climbed inside. The air in the house was heavy, smelling of damp dust and old paper. She navigated the dark hallways by memory. Her hand trailed along the wallpaper, feeling the texture of her past. She wasn't just a trespasser. She was the ghost of this house. She entered the library, and there it was. Resting on the dusty mantelpiece was the HMS Sovereign, a large, intricate wooden model ship Arthur had spent years building. Vance had left it here. To him, it was just junk, trash to be thrown out when the bulldozers came. Oona approached it. Her hands trembled, not from cold, but from rage. She remembered the nights Arthur spent sanding that hull. He used to say, "Oona, if anything ever happens to me, look to the Sovereign. She's unsinkable." She raised the stolen hammer. Vance was having a terrible morning. The investors were screaming at him on the phone. "The demolition is scheduled for noon." The voice hissed, If that land isn't cleared, the deal is void, and we will want our deposit back, with interest." "It's done," Vance lied, smoothing his silk tie. "It's just an old pile of bricks. I'm heading there now to supervise." He hung up and checked his reflection in the rear-view mirror. He looked powerful. He looked untouchable. He had no idea that a ghost was waiting for him on the hill. Arrogance is a funny thing. It blinds you to the small details, like the fact that he never actually found the original deed. He just forged a new one. Vance sped toward the estate, his sports car tearing through the mud. Back in the library, Oona brought the hammer down. Smash! The wooden hull of the ship splintered. It didn't break easily. Arthur had built it to last. She struck it again. Crack! The wood gave way. Inside the hollow hull, wrapped in oilcloth to protect it from moisture, was a thick leather ledger and a stack of yellowed envelopes. Oona pulled them out. She opened the ledger. It wasn't just a deed. It was a shadow log. Arthur hadn't just been a businessman. He had been Vance's silent partner in the early days, and he had recorded every bribe, every cut corner, and every illegal offshore transfer Vance had made to build his empire. And, at the bottom of the stack, the original, irrevocable deed to the Highgate estate, granting lifetime tenancy to Oona, with a clause that stated the property could never be sold as long as she drew breath. Outside, the roar of engines shattered the silence. Oona walked to the window. Through the rain, she saw them. 2 massive yellow bulldozers were rumbling up the driveway, their tracks churning the muddy lawn into a swamp. A black luxury car skidded to a halt behind them. Vance stepped out. He was holding an umbrella, trying to protect his expensive suit from the storm. He waved his arm, signaling the machines to move forward. The first bulldozer revved its engine. The blade lifted, aiming for the porch pillars. Oona didn't hide. She didn't call the police. The police took too long. She needed to stop this now. She walked to the front door, opened it, and stepped onto the crumbling porch. Vance froze. He blinked, wiping rain from his eyes. He looked like he was seeing a hallucination. "Auntie?" he shouted over the engine noise. "What are you doing here? You're supposed to be in your room." "Stop the machines, Vance," Oona said. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the rain. Vance laughed. It was a nervous, jagged sound. "You've lost your mind. Go back inside. We're tearing this dump down." He signaled the driver again. "Do it." The bulldozer lurched forward. The metal blade was 3 feet from the stairs. Oona reached into her cardigan. She didn't pull out a gun. She pulled out the oilcloth bundle. She let the ledger drop open. The pages fluttered in the wind. "I found the ship, Vance," she called out. Vance went still. The color drained from his face so fast it looked like he'd been slapped. He knew about the ship. He knew Arthur had hidden something. He just never knew where. "Stop," Vance whispered. Then he screamed it. "Stop." Cut the engine. The bulldozer halted, the blade hovering inches from the wood. Vance ran up the steps, slipping in the mud, ruining his Italian shoes. "Give that to me," he hissed, reaching out. "You senile old bat, give it to me." Oona didn't flinch. She held the ledger over the railing, directly above a puddle of thick brown sludge. One step closer, and Arthur's evidence goes into the mud. Ink runs. Vance. Evidence disappears. Vance froze. He was shaking. "What do you want? Money? I can put you in a better home. A private suite." "I have a home," Oona said, looking around at the rotting pillars. "I'm standing in it." "You can't live here. It's condemned." "Because you condemned it," she retorted. "But these papers, they prove you committed fraud to do it, and they prove you stole the company funds to pay for your investors. Vance looked at the construction crew watching them. He looked at his car. He looked at the house. He realized the trap had snapped shut. "If I don't demo this land today," Vance pleaded, his voice cracking, "they will kill me. The people I borrowed from. They don't accept refunds." Oona looked at him, really looked at him. She saw the fear of a small boy in a man's suit. This is the moment where most people would feel pity. They would think, he's family. But Oona remembered the 20 years of staring at a white wall. She remembered the locked doors. "That sounds like a you problem," Oona said. She tossed the ledger onto the dry porch floor behind her, safe from the rain. Then she pulled out a single envelope from her pocket. "This," she said, holding it up, "is a copy of the deed sent to the city council this morning by my friend at the library. The land is historically protected, as of 10 minutes ago." Vance fell to his knees in the mud. He didn't scream. He just stared at the ground as the reality crushed him. The investors were waiting, the bulldozers were idling, and he had nothing. Oona turned her back on him. She walked inside and closed the door. She locked it. 6 months later, spring had fully arrived. The vines were cut back. The windows were clean. Oona sat on the porch, drinking tea from a porcelain cup. The garden was blooming wild, chaotic, but beautiful. She watched the news on a small tablet. The headline read, "Real estate tycoon indicted in massive fraud scheme." Vance looked terrible in the mugshot. He had lost the suit, the car, and the arrogance. Oona took a sip of tea. The house was still old. It still needed repairs. But the foundation was solid stone, just like her. Vance ended up in a cell just 6 feet wide, ironically, smaller than the room he had forced Oona to live in. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just waits for the rain to stop. Oona kept the house, but she sold the land behind it to the city for a park. She sits there every day, watching the children play. But would you have been that merciful? Vance ruined 20 years of her life. Was prison enough? Or should she have let the investors find him first? Let me know in the comments.